Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here to moderate this panel today. It's not a very long panel, so I'm going to quickly go through some introductions and not waste too much time on that. So I'm delighted to be joined by Matthias v. Gerber. He drives EMEA business development at Bitmain, focusing on hydro-cooled mining systems and containerized infrastructure. And he works at the intersection of Bitcoin mining, renewable energy, and large-scale infrastructure. Callum is the founder and CEO of RenewaBlox. He is a macroeconomic and geopolitical energy analyst and specializes also in the interconnection of Bitcoin mining and energy transition. Dame Andrea Jenkyns, I think you probably already know who she is because she was on the previous panel. And then we have Daniel Turner, who's the founder of Power the Future, an organization which advocates for American energy workers. So thank you for joining me today. Our topic, drill baby drill, mine baby mine. So with two panelists from the Bitcoin industry, we might get a slightly alternative definition of mining in this panel, but we'll see what they have to say. But I'd like to start with you, Andrea. Reform UK has been very clear on the need to exploit UK oil and gas resources. Can you explain why you believe that and how you address concerns over environmental issues?
Thank you. In Greater Lincolnshire, we have the gas find under our feet, but we've seen that Miliband and the Labour government have got a moratorium on fracking. Now, we're talking 100 billion to the economy, and we could really power Britain. And so I'm a proponent of it. And to me, look, Lincolnshire produces 30% of renewable energy into the UK. It's creating lots of jobs. However, businesses will go, won't they, wherever there's subsidies. And this is why we've got this makeup. But by putting all your eggs in one basket and not using these amazing resources, I just think it's ridiculous, and it's making us more reliant on foreign regimes. And what about energy security? That is not secure. So that's my one point. But so what I'm doing as mayor is I'm ensuring that I won't give money to renewable energy companies, but I'm ensuring that we've got the right skills in the system which will can work cross energy. And if we get a reform government at the next general election, we can lift the moratorium and ensure that, you know, we can drill baby drill.
Okay, thank you. Daniel, moving on to mining. What are your thoughts on the potential for the UK to extract energy-related natural resources such as coal and lithium?
The whole world runs on coal. And in the United States, I'm one of the more vocal coal proponents, and there's been a war on coal worldwide for a long time. And yet we are foregoing coal in our countries. Here in the UK, you've banned coal. Your Cornwall is what we would call Appalachia in the United States. We have banned coal only to then say that the Chinese can burn coal. You can't burn coal to make electricity, but the Chinese can burn coal to make solar panels that then we buy to make electricity, and somehow we consider that green. So it doesn't make any sense. You can't make cement without coal. You can't make concrete without coal. Everything in this room has been touched by coal. And we say, well, we're going to use renewables, and we can argue that in another conversation. We're going to use wind or solar, but you can't make wind and solar without coal. You can't make the materials that mine lithium and cobalt and copper. You can't make any of that equipment without coal. So all of it comes down to coal. So why have we foregone coal? In the UK, you have hundreds of years of coal reserves, which means you could power your economy very efficiently, very affordably, and all of the nonsense of coal is dirty, again, of course, the Chinese can burn all the coal they want, and we will buy their products, and we consider that somehow green or good for the economy, but we're not allowed to responsibly use coal in our own countries. It's an absolute absurdity. So coal is the essential part of a robust economy, and the UK should go back to using your coal reserves, which God blessed you with.
I've been saying this a long time.
Hundreds of years.
Let's give the guy a clap. Isn't that brilliant? Future Prime Minister, eh? Yeah, come to Britain, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's also something that people overlook in the discussion around renewables, is that renewables is only 20% of our energy consumption. The other 80% is coming from fossil fuels. And so it's really unrealistic when, electricity is 20% of our energy consumption, so it's very unrealistic to say that we can just electrify everything and switch to renewables. It's a hugely difficult thing. We're actually nowhere near being able to do it, although I think policymakers sometimes talk as if it's just around the corner. So Callum, I'd like to turn to you now and ask you a similar question, really. What opportunities do you see for UK natural resources? What do they need to flourish, and what are the environmental and economic impacts that we need to consider?
Okay, well, we do have wonderful opportunities in this country, but it is certainly a very challenging environment. I think, as you pointed out there, Andrea, it's very difficult to bring some of these sites online. There is another gas field, interestingly, at West Newton, which is near Hull, and this is another site that's one of the largest onshore gas reserves that's been discovered in the UK. There's a firm called RenewaBlox Resources that's been spending 7 years trying to drill these wells. Now, during that time, the UK has suffered 2 gas-specific energy crises, and we were in desperate need of more domestic resources. And yet, multiple bureaucratic agencies, politically, the Environment Agency, and even more recently, the Highways Agency, have been delaying this project from moving forwards when we desperately needed it. But now, thankfully, I have to say, because of Bitcoin mining, that has unlocked this site. So Bitcoin mining as a versatile, modular, and location-agnostic form of demand can deploy right there in West Newton, monetize the gas directly at the wellhead, and essentially enable a bridging technology to RenewaBlox's longer-term strategy. So you don't need all of the complex infrastructure outside of the wellhead. You can just monetize it right there and then. And I'm really proud to say that RenewaBlox are taking a big part in being involved in bringing that site online and helping contribute to the UK's energy security.
Can I just come in, actually? I mean, first of all, when I was 4, I lived in West Newton before I moved to Lincolnshire, wow. Which so I probably need a further chat about what you're doing there. I can't remember the name of it, but isn't it right? In Europe, they're extracting the gas horizontally instead of vertically, and it's a lot more safer system.
Yeah, that's fracking, exactly.
Yes,
it's horizontal
absolutely.
drilling. Yeah.
So is that what you're doing there?
It's a part of fracking. It's not all of the equation, hydraulic fracking, but a part of it is horizontal drilling. And yes, in West Newton, that is the plan. That's how they'll unlock the majority of that reserve, is by a horizontal drill.
Yeah, but we do have the fracking ban, so you have to...
Yes.
No, but I think that's great, though. No.
Yeah, I mean, one of the difficulties is that people talk as if conventional drilling and fracking are 2 completely different things, and they're not. We do lots of horizontal drilling in the North Sea already, but now we've imposed this fracking ban onshore, and so it does limit the extent to which you can do that.
Exactly.
So yes, I mean, there's no outright moratorium on conventional drilling.
Yes, exactly.
And
it's
so
to do with the pressures, exactly.
It has to fit into that scope of conventional drilling, which does involve.
No, but I'm saying if we've got a way around it, we need to talk. Can I just pick up on some of your points as well, if that's okay? You mentioned about the importance of coal and on solar panels, etc. I mean, in Lincolnshire, we've got 40,000 acres planned of solar farms on prime agricultural land. And we talk about energy security, but what about food security? And this is my deep concern. I mean, we're talking 600,000 acres of solar farms across the UK, which is twice the size of Greater Manchester. I mean, isn't this ludicrous? I mean, in Lincolnshire, we feed Britain. And Miliband, I mean, we saw even donors of the Labour Party getting planning permission to this. I'm not saying there's anything dodgy there, honestly. But it's wrong. And I've been trying to fight this. But another thing on top of this, which I'd love to hear the rest of the panel and yourself, sorry I'm taking over here because I'm quite passionate about this, but I think we need to look at a way, the next government, in the national grid. Everything goes into the national grid, and I think more people will be open to things like fracking and these other technologies if there's a local regional benefit where they can get cheaper energy bills. Is there anything out there elsewhere in the country, other countries where you've got more of a regional basis? Because that's the conversation we need to have.
So we
'Cause
actually
you all
do-
want cheaper energy bills, don't you?
We actually do have that in some places in Britain.
Okay.
And it's, so most of these solar schemes are actually connecting to the low voltage networks. And it is open then to the developer to provide benefits to local people. So that does happen in some
But
cases.
that quite often is building a community centre and stuff like that, isn't it?
No, it can
I'd
be-
like to see lower energy.
It can be money off the
Okay.
bills as well, particularly if they're controlling the supply in some way. But it's complicated because they don't all want to do that because you have to then become a licensed supplier and
Okay.
blah, blah, blah. The real challenge actually that we're having with this solar is it's actually breaking the grid. Yeah. We have so much of it now that in the summer, it's overloading the grid and it's causing the frequency of the grid to go up too much. But because it's on the low voltage networks, the transmission system operator cannot see it and cannot control it and can't turn it off. So the only tools it has then to keep the transmission system stable is to either export it or use it. But at the end of May, the EU imposed a limit on the amount of cross-border trading the system operator is allowed to do within day. It slashed it. And so now, in fact, on 3 different occasions in the last week of June, the system operator had to ask for permission to breach that limit because it couldn't stabilize the grid. And actually, at that time, they wanted to go the other way and import. But so it's insane that the system operator cannot see or control this stuff that is literally breaking the grid. And we're subsidizing people to build even more of it. So I'll just leave that there, and I think we need to turn to Matthias. And I want to ask you, you sit at the, you see where investment is actually flowing across EMEA. And so if a British renewable developer called you tomorrow and said, should we invest in a scheme in Britain, given all of these lovely subsidies, what would you advise them to do? Would you advise them to stay in Britain or go elsewhere? Because we do have rhetoric from both Reform and the Conservatives, and I think the polls tell us that one of those 2 parties is likely to form the next government, which is very hostile to subsidising renewables. So what would you advise a developer thinking of coming here?
Yes, first of all, thank you for the introduction, and hello everyone. I'm terribly sorry both our teams lost to Argentina at this World Cup, but just like there's things like the hand of God that is not in our control, there are things that are, and that's why I'm very happy to be speaking here today and to offer a few solutions and perspectives that we can manage and push forward, just as RenewaBlox is doing in the UK with renewable energy. I came across a very startling statistic when preparing for this panel, that Britain customers spend around 1.5 billion managing transmission constraints, paying wind farms to turn off because the grid couldn't carry the electricity where it was needed, whereas paying more than £1 billion for replacement generation. And also according to NECO, this cost could rise to £8 billion per year by 2030. Which of course will be then paid by the consumers and households with increased energy bills. So when you see these numbers, it's something fundamental becomes clear, that in the renewable energy and space, Britain does not have energy constraints. No, it has a distribution problem, because abundant renewable energy sits in the north or Scotland, while most demand is in the south. And transmission lines can take up to 10 years to build. Whereas we come in as Bitcoin miners with modular, containerized solutions that can be manufactured, shipped, and then deployed alongside stressed or abandoned renewable sites, or wind parks and assets, thereby within a short period of 6 months, less than 6 months, being profitable and monetizing. Not only monetizing gas, but monetizing renewables, which is incredible. And therefore, instead of waiting for the grid to reach the generator, bring Bitcoin miners directly to renewable energy sources as a flexible off-taker of last resources. So flexible compute thereby acts on this becoming an economic shock absorber for the whole system, because while renewable energy mining generates money, the transmission and the infrastructure has time to catch up and be built. And this is very interesting also. Would love to talk with you after the panel in person about opportunities for Lincolnshire. And thank you, RenewaBlox, for what you're doing in the UK. You're pioneers in that, and I think it's the right direction to monetize renewable energy. And there's global, yeah, it's great.
I mean,
a good example.
Talking about renewables, though, I mean, if, for example, solar. I mean, I've got no problem with businesses putting on their roofs, putting on top of car parks, putting on rail lines. It's no-brainer, especially for a business, if it lowers energy bills. But my big beef really is that we're not making the most of our natural resources below our feet, and that's what we really need to do.
I would slightly challenge you, Matthias, on this. So I can see the rationale where you have existing subsidized renewables to avoid paying congestion charges and constraint payments. What I really disagree with is providing fresh subsidies for new renewable schemes that are going to generate electricity that can't be used, and then soaking that up with Bitcoin. Now, we have, one of the worst examples is a wind farm called Sea Green. It was opened in October 2023, and it's located off the Scottish coast. In 2024, 2/3 of the output of that wind farm was curtailed. And in 2025, that went up to 3/4. So basically, we're building wind farms in full knowledge that we can't use most of the electricity that they generate. And we're paying subsidies. We're paying billions of pounds of subsidies to do it. And then we're paying billions of pounds in curtailment costs because we can't use that electricity. So if it's already built, fair enough, make use of it. But if it's not already built, I really don't see how this is in the best interests of consumers.
Well, in fairness to Matthias, I might just jump in there. I mean, some of the figures are eye-watering. So we spent £1.5 billion on constraint payments last year, and as Matthias said, that could increase to £8 billion by 2030. And I completely agree with the sentiment that we shouldn't be continuing to build new wind farms just to curtail them, just to absorb that with Bitcoin mining. But as you just said there with Sea Green, it is notorious just how little of that energy actually reaches the end consumer. And Bitcoin mining as a bridging technology is the perfect solution to absorb that and help bring down bills for everyone.
I think the question is, what do you want to measure as success? And when it comes to the renewables conversation, if the success metric is some fake number that a politician created, by the year 2030, 40% of our grid will be powered by, that's how they measure success. I would measure success as what is it costing the consumer and whether or not it's making the grid more reliable. And if that is your measure of what works or what is successful, there is no place in the world that this has worked. All it has done is just drive up prices higher and higher. I hate to harp back on the communist Chinese, but they are a serious concern of mine. They're paying 5 or 6 pence per kilowatt hour. Here in the UK, you're paying close to 50 pence per kilowatt hour. Why? Because they don't play any of this crap. They burn coal. They don't burn it responsibly like we do in the West, but they provide cheap, reliable power. They take their grid so damn seriously because they know if their grid fails, we are going to stop buying the crap that they're producing. We don't take our grid seriously, so we have a metric of success. By the year 2035, 50% of the US will be green. Who the hell cares? We're destroying our grid and we're charging ratepayers a fortune so that a politician gets a talking point, and it's destroying us.
So the Chinese have actually, so this is anecdotally, but the Chinese have restricted the use of intermittent renewables on their grid to not more than 20% of total generation, which I think gives quite a good indicator of what's going on here, because people say, pro-renewables advocates like to say, oh, but China, they've massively grown their use of renewables. And that's true, but they've grown their use of fossil fuels even more. And that's the bit that nobody talks about. Okay, so I think we've not got that long left. I wanted to open this to the floor and see if any of the audience have any questions that they would like to ask the panel. And I can't really see you very well, but I think, yes, there's a gentleman over there. Could we maybe bring the microphone on the end there? Okay, well, apparently there isn't a microphone. I was told there was.
Thank you very much. Energy prices are mostly fairly global. So while it might help Britain's productivity and wealth, which is very valuable, would it really help prices that much, drilling for gas?
Okay, so I think I'm rudely going to take that one, if you don't mind, because this is right up my alley. Okay, so the phrase energy prices are global is kind of a misnomer. In oil, you've got three main indices that you look at. There's Brent, which is the main seaborne index that covers Europe and the Atlantic. You've got West Texas Intermediate, which is really the pipeline oil network in the US. And then you've got Dubai, which is more the Asian index. It's similar in gas. You've got Henry Hub in the US. You've got TTF, the Tidal Transfer Facility in the Netherlands for Europe. And then you have JKM, which is the Japan-Korea marker in Asia. Now, typically, Henry Hub is far, far cheaper in gas terms than any gas elsewhere. And then TTF and JKM take it in turns as to which is higher or lower. Interestingly, though, the National Balancing Point, NBP, which is the British price benchmark, is roughly 5 to 7% cheaper than TTF. And the reason for this is literally to do with physical infrastructure. All of the gas that we in Britain produce in the North Sea comes into the British gas grid. It doesn't go anywhere else because that's where the pipes go. The gas comes out of the well into a pipe into Britain. Now, technically, you could build a floating liquefaction plant in the North Sea. It's phenomenally expensive. People only do it if there's no pipeline infrastructure. So nobody's going to do that. And we just don't have very much pipe capacity from Britain into Europe, and we have no liquefaction capacity anywhere in Britain, onshore either. All our LNG terminals are import only. They're regas, not liquefaction. So there is not the physical infrastructure to trade away that price arbitrage between NBP and TTF. So it's just not true that prices are global, they're regional. And it is absolutely true that if we increased our drilling for gas, we would lower prices in Britain. It wouldn't be dramatic, but in the summer, we could displace LNG altogether because we actually don't import that much LNG in the summer. So it would have a noticeable impact, and it would widen that difference with the European benchmark.
If I could just add to that as well, because you asked me about environmental and economic impacts of drilling earlier. The UK gets most of its gas from our North Sea basin and Norway's, which is delivered mostly by pipeline, which, as you said. But about 15% of our gas comes from LNG, so liquefied natural gas, and that proportion is growing. Now, the majority of that comes from the States, and a lot of it from the Texan Permian Basin. And just to paint a picture there, the gas is fracked, travels 500 miles to the Gulf Coast, is cooled to negative 162 degrees Celsius onto a ship, which then travels 4,000 miles across the Atlantic. And so any new reserves that we tap domestically are going to displace that highly irrational gas that we're getting from the US. And I think that's a very logical thing to do, frankly.
I would just add one other thing, which is in any global commodity, increase the supply and prices will go down, whether it's wheat, whether it's gold, whether it's copper. And then you have to look at the forces that are controlling that commodity. And if they don't want the prices to go down, they will suppress any effort. So if I control the copper world, which again, China, I'm stuck on China, I don't want anyone to open a copper mine in the world because I control copper prices because I'm benefiting from it. So if you could, who are the forces that are trying to stop you in the UK from exploring responsibly the North Sea? China's operating there, and they're doing quite well. The Scandinavians are. Russia is. Why can't the UK? It's just a huge question mark. And we do the same stupidity in the States. That's not a knock on your great kingdom. We do the same nonsense there.
Any other questions? Yes, the gentleman here.
What's the panel's view? Thank you. So the Norwegians use their energy oil and use it in a sovereign wealth fund to stabilise their currency and the country for the future. What's the panel's view on doing something similar in the UK, nationally, with the North Sea oil and fracking, of putting it into a British sovereign wealth fund? I think Richard Tice has spoken about something similar, and maybe doing it regionally in Lincolnshire, having a regional sovereign wealth fund, and doing that for the future and actually stockpiling the wealth for generational use to invest long term. And just, we've got the oil in the North Sea. It's right next to Norway. There's no reason we can't copy them. We know it's a good business model.
So I did write a blog on this, actually, on this exact topic, and it is very interesting. Yeah, so the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund is now worth well over $1 trillion. They own, it's a ridiculous percentage of global equities. It's something like 4% of global equities the Sovereign Wealth Fund owns. And as you said, it was started back in Margaret Thatcher's time. Unfortunately, it was a divergence of decision-making, whereas the Norwegians decided to try and drill a little bit slower, and to put that into a wealth fund, we decided to use that to fund a lot of welfare. At the time, the coal industry was in massive decline, and so unfortunately we spent a lot of it. But I guess, you know, it's not to say that now isn't the best time to start that and to start putting some of the profits from, I guess, from the wind farms, the seabed leases, and from the remaining gas and oil into a wealth fund. But it's a very stark contrast of just how good long-term decision-making can provide long-term benefits if you lower your time horizon. And that's what the Norwegians did, where we didn't, unfortunately.
There is a tax difficulty that we're facing because our tax regime requires oil and gas producers to pay extra tax while the fields are producing, and then they get some of that back when they go into decommissioning. It's a mechanism to ensure that they actually have cash on hand to meet their decommissioning obligations. So it's not a subsidy, it's a rebate, and it's part of the decommissioning regime. Now, because of the accelerated decline of the North Sea under the very hostile fiscal environment at the moment, the UK is going to go into net decommissioning probably a decade earlier than it would have done, and that will start in probably about 2030. And what that means is the Treasury will actually be paying out more under the decommissioning regime than it's receiving in from producers. And in that case, then, there would be no wealth to put in a sovereign wealth fund because we'd be requiring to pay it out under the decommissioning regime. So that's one illustration of the extent to which these resources have been mismanaged. So I think we maybe have time for, if we'll take 2 questions, and then that will, I think, will be the end. So there's a lady in the middle here, and the gentleman at the back over there, please.
Hello, everybody. Dame Andrea, I'm from Lincolnshire. I'm from Market Raisin. I'm an animal scientist, and I also produce animal feed. And when you're talking about food security, one of the biggest problems up in Lincolnshire I've seen is that there's more and more land being taken up by not just solar panels, but also by the farmers being paid subsidies just to plant rewilding and things like that. So our food security has been diminished in Lincolnshire. One of the other problems that we have up there is the data centres that are popping up. How are we going to provide the electricity that is needed for these data centres? Are we going to lose more of our land? Are we going to lose more of our farming in that area?
If we could just have the gentleman at the back as well there, please.
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering what the panel believe would be any more useful than a nuclear revival that we're seeing, which is a regulatory problem, not a technical problem. And I know that Kathryn's written about this, but it speaks to the linear no threshold theory being discarded and perhaps using the leftover uranium plutonium that we have, which provides already enough electricity potentially for many centuries to come.
Shall I do the Lincolnshire? Yes. Thank you. And we'll have to catch up afterwards if you're a constituent. Look, First of all, we'll go talk about the data center. I mean, we had some interest in our region, but it'd take up 15% of the grid, which we haven't got that capacity in Lincolnshire. And also, we have issues with water management. This is why I set up a water management board to look at, I mean, if I just give an example, we had on water management, even though we're along the coast, and become quite inland, we had a factory what was going to create 2,000 jobs, and Anglian Water was refusing to set them up with water for the business. I mean, we intervened and actually contacted government as well, and we got this moving, but it shows you the real challenges. Regarding farmers, look, I back our farmers. They've been hammered by the Labour government. I've got a lot of farmers in Lincolnshire who's become friends, and they've had it hard. And even where flooding's concerned, they want to dredge their own rivers near their fields. The Environment Agency, I believe, needs disbanding. And we've got to get dredging again. But look, farmers are being hammered. I can understand why some of them are trying to do the solar stuff or the rewilding, because some of them are not surviving. And that's very sad. So we need to make sure. I mean, I met with the NFU and some farmers only 3 weeks ago, and we're working on some policies on what can we do to help Lincolnshire farmers, because we don't want them going out of business. They're being hammered by the government. They're being hammered by supermarkets. Also making sure, yeah, okay.